in the West, we're all about doing the thing, whereas in the East, we could say it's all about not doing. That's undoubtedly a great oversimplification, but it helps to kind of grasp the essence of the differentiation that we're talking about here. So, in the East, and most particularly in the Taoist tradition, it's definitely about not doing. So it's not that we're not doing the thing, because there's no thing to do. We're just not doing, but there's no thing. So we could call that a very non-specific situation, and there's no method to it. There's not a lot we can say about it in a kind of practical kind of terms. Like, it's very hard to get guidance on how to not do. It's a problem, because if you come and start telling me how to not do and I listen to you, when I try and do what you've told me, that will be doing, obviously. So we can tell people how to do, we can train people how to do, we can educate people how to do, we can test people and give them examinations to show that they do know the right thing to do. But as far as not doing is concerned, there's no way to teach it. And there's no regimented way to test for it either. There's no standardized way that we can test for it. There's pretty much no way that we can test for it. Although if you were to meet someone who is able to not do, you'd know it, you'd feel it probably, if you had any sensitivity to that sort of thing. And the reason you'd know it is because you'd be able to sense there is a kind of a stillness or peacefulness, kind of a sense of humor, a kind of lightness that goes with it. And doing's not like that. Doing's kind of busy and serious and just kind of officious, and there's always a sense of compulsion. So when we talk about doing the thing, that's always a compulsive kind of thing, like you have to do the thing, you have to do the thing. Why aren't you doing the thing? And then following on from this whole business of doing the thing, there's the two possible outcomes. One being congratulations and approval if you get to do the thing correctly. Oh, well done, you did the thing. Jesus, aren't you great? You're fantastic. You did that thing. You did the thing really well. So we're all about that in the West. That's the highest accolade we could get. That's the greatest thing any of us could ever hope to attain, is to be able to do the thing really, really well, superlatively well, fantastically well. Like nobody else could do the thing like he can do it or like she can do it. Whoa, did you see that? It's like something else. So it's kind of similar to the idea of experthood. It's similar to the idea of James Carsey's master player being a master finite game player, which is something we venerate no end. But the same doesn't apply to not doing. No one will ever come up to you, not very often anyway, I can't imagine it happening very often, and slap you on the back and say, gosh, you're brilliant at not doing. I was just looking at you not doing and doing that bit of not doing you were doing there. That was truly masterful. Jesus, the best I've ever come across at not doing. So this whole idea of competing where not doing is concerned is impossible. There's no standard. We need a common standard in order to compete. There's no standard, there's no common standard, there's no standard at all for not doing. So whereas with doing, there's two possible outcomes, as I was starting to say. One is where we succeed and everyone's shouting and screaming and throwing their hats in the air, and successful doing, the greatest thing there is. And then the other side of the coin is fail doing, which is the purest, most unbearable form of ignominy there is. Better to die, better to fall into a hole and never emerge again than to experience the excruciating taint of failed doing. And the funny thing about that is that although we're so very clear about what winning is, and what losing is, what succeeding is, what failing is, so clearly defined, so unambiguous, that it actually gets to feel very unquestionable. We can't question it because it's so definite, it's so in your face. It doesn't give us any way. It's very hard to deconstruct it. It doesn't give us any way of deconstructing it. It seems to be something that can't be deconstructed. But we can deconstruct it, because the thing about doing the thing is that doing the thing is inevitably, the thing that we're doing is inevitably pitifully banal and superficial. All things are. Things are only things. Whatever the thing it is, maybe I can hop faster than you on one leg. Maybe I can hang from the ceiling with one hand longer than you can. All the things are kind of trivial because it's only a thing. And ultimately, and this is the whole point about games, ultimately the thing is meaningless. The thing that we are supposed to do is meaningless. So there's this huge weighting attached to whether we succeed or whether we fail, and that makes us feel ridiculously exultant or ridiculously down in the dumps. But when we go back a little bit and look at what we're doing, the thing that we're trying to do is purely meaningless in the bigger scheme of things. It's meaningful in the smaller scheme of things, where all we can see is the thing and our need to do it. That's pretty much our basic human situation. We're stuck there with the need to do the thing. But it's meaningless. The thing is meaningless. And that's, of course, what it's like in games, because in a game, we'll say, okay, if you can do such and such, then we're going to call that winning, and that's great. It's super great. Whatever it is. Kick a ball between two posts, whatever it is. It's meaningless. To be sure, it is totally meaningless, because all games are meaningless. That's the property of being a game. The reason games are meaningless is because what constitutes succeeding in the game is arbitrarily assigned. So once we can understand that, then we understand why games, what happens in a game, stays in a game and is meaningless. We can see that clearly when we're not playing the game. It's like, what's all the fuss about? It's only a game, as we say. But when we're stuck in the game, it's not only a game, it's everything. To win is everything, to lose is the loss of everything. So we're really right up there in the height of passion or in the depths of despair, all about an arbitrarily assigned set of criteria. So that is strange. Well, it's not strange, it's technically it's absurd, to use the word absurd in a technical sense. It is simply absurd. And yet the definition of a game, the only definition of a game, is that situation in which there is a clear-cut set of circumstances in which we can be said to have won, But this definition of what it means to have won is arbitrarily assigned. Now, if it wasn't arbitrarily assigned, what we would be talking about wouldn't be a game, it'd be something else. It would be genuinely serious. Seriously. But actually, there's nothing that's genuinely serious. As Alan Watts says, or kind of says, or maybe he does say, you don't have to do anything. Or as James Carr says, anyone who plays freely. Once we do play the game, then it's not free anymore because we have to. That's when the have to comes in. We have to win. We mustn't lose. But we enter into that game completely freely. It's like, oh yeah, I'll play the game. That's an arbitrary action. I could just as well say, no, I don't feel like playing it. No, I don't want. I'm going to go and do something else instead. So we can only play a game if we freely take it upon ourselves to play it. And once we are in the game, then there's no more freedom. And that's just another way of saying that once we're in the game, nothing is real, because we can take that as a litmus test of reality, i.e., that there's freedom in it. If there's freedom in it, it's reality. It's passed the test. If there's no freedom in it, it's a game, because that's how games work. Games work on compulsivity, being driven to win, being driven to fight against losing, and compulsivity comes from the situation being totally defined, and at the same time, when we do find ourselves in this situation where we are compulsively being driven in a totally defined situation, we know that that isn't reality, something else, some kind of thing that we've invented for ourselves to pass the time, distract ourselves, immerse ourselves in, whichever way we want to put it. Or from a psychological point of view, we could say that the motivation to become immersed in games such that we don't know that the game is a game is to avoid the bigger picture. So that's a huge, huge motivation, to avoid the bigger picture. It's the motivation of fear. So in our unconscious lives, which is to say, when we're playing a game but don't know we're playing a game, which is always the case when we're playing a game, then in that case, we are completely subject to compulsivity, or being determined by something that's outside of us, not only being told what to do, but being told what things are and who we are. And that's a game. And that particular situation where we know who we are, and we know what the world is, and we know what we're supposed to be doing, and we know what we're not supposed to be doing, is not real. It's a made-up thing we do and get immersed in order to avoid being aware of the bigger picture. On the face of it, this seems strange, because we would think, well, that sounds pretty rough. It sounds not very nice at all to be stuck in this compulsive situation where we're struggling fearfully or greedily. It's the same thing. If we're greedy for a positive outcome, we're fearful of the negative. So this situation where we're desperately struggling to avoid the bad thing and obtain the good thing, and there's no freedom in it, and we're kept busy the whole time, doesn't sound like much fun. And yet, at the same time, we've just said that the litmus test for reality is when there's freedom in it, i.e. you don't have to do anything. You do it out of freedom if you're going to do it. You don't do it out of compulsion or necessity. So well, why? Why would we want to escape the bigger picture, which is reality, which is that which has freedom in it, that situation in which we are not being compelled to see the world in any particular way, or ourselves in any particular way, or to do any particular things. So why do we want to flee from that? It sounds quite idyllic, really. Freedom sounds good. In our personal lives, we wouldn't like someone following us around, telling us what to do the whole time and shouting at us. And we would like to be free to do anything at all. So why are we running away from freedom? Why do we need to immerse ourselves in games? Or, going back to how we started off this conversation, why do we constantly need to be going on about doing the thing? You have to do the thing, and it's so important to do the thing. Which is an archetypal con, because the impression is that if we do the thing, everything will be great, everything will be rosy, but it isn't, because doing the thing is just leading on to another doing the thing. There's nothing else in this particular, in the game reality other than doing the thing, because if there was, then it wouldn't be a game, so you can't have a not game in a game. You can't have freedom within a game. You can have a game within freedom, as James Carr says, but you can't have it the other way around. So, in the West, just to reframe everything in the light of what we've just said, what I've just said, in the West, we're mad about playing games. We have to be immersed in a game. We have to be immersed in an unreal situation the whole time. And we can't admit that that is the case, because part of playing is not knowing that you're playing. So really in the West, we're just totally unconscious. And we're validating that unconscious state by saying that it's the right way to be, and coming down heavily on anyone that doesn't want to join in. So what we can say is that our particular way of life in the West is an inverted way of life, where we value the lack of freedom and kind of validate by saying that it's the right way to do things. And if we do it the right way, it will ultimately lead to all sorts of good things, the ultimate good thing, heaven, paradise, personal bliss, whichever way we want to put it. So we validate our state of slavery to things or to ideas. An idea is the same as a thing, because a thing is an idea. It's not real, because in reality there are no things, as Bodhidharma said. As Bodhidharma said, there never was. So we have everything backwards. But no matter how we choose to look at things, no matter what slant we may put on it, living in a world with no freedom is not healthy. Eventually it's going to do us in, because living in a world with no freedom means we're living in hope of gaining freedom, or the equivalent, or the analog of freedom, whatever that might be. We might call it anything. Just the very, very good thing that makes it worthwhile to do all the crap that I'm spending all my life doing, but not to worry, because the very, very good thing is going to happen that's going to make it worthwhile, which is a lie, because it won't. So we invert all of that, and it's not good for us, because you can only carry on like that so long. Some people can carry on longer than others. Some people can't thrive in it at all. Some people seem to get on okay. But on the whole, we can say that it's a mentally unhealthy situation. We can say that it's a sickness. It's an illness, the illness of unconsciousness, which we continually try to validate by saying it's mental health. But actually, it isn't mental health. It isn't anything wholesome at all. It's a scurrilous evasion of reality, trying to justify itself as being so. How could you possibly validate the compulsive attempt to continuously evade reality? How can you validate that? But we do. We totally validate it. But it goes on to cause problems, because we experience neurotic suffering as a consequence. We could define neurotic suffering in a number of ways, but for the sake of this particular argument, we can say it's that state of being completely eaten up by pointless, petty things that we can't help thinking are very important. And that's a good way of defining it. We suffer an awful lot on behalf of trivialities, things that don't matter a damn. And on one way, we know they don't matter a damn, but we suffer to the limit at the same time. That's the flip side of unconsciousness. Unconsciousness can give us a sense of bliss because we're escaping from what we're afraid of, but it plunges us into neurotic torment as a result. So neurotic torment's all around us. In the West, we celebrate unconsciousness. We celebrate being mechanical and living in a world that is a construct, whilst kidding ourselves that it's the only way things could ever be. And we suffer a lot as a consequence. And then the joke, coming to the kind of punchline, the joke about all this is, when we do suffer, as I've said, I know I have a habit of saying this, but what we do when we come across people who are suffering from the sickness, and the sickness can no longer be validated, it's bursting out, I can no longer say, oh, I'm fine, because it's obvious that I'm not fine. What we do is we come up with some extra special things to do, and we say, you have to do the thing. So if I'm a psychologist, I'm going to give you a thing to do. If I'm a therapist, whatever the hell it is, we've got a whole new collection of special things to do that will supposedly help us.